Hi, you're listening to Marcia Pally and conversations I'm having with people about the criteria we should use to design and implement our economic and political policies. What should be our basic framework for determining public policy? These conversations are based on ideas from a book of mine, Commonwealth and Covenant, Economics, Politics, and Theologies of Relationality, because we're looking specifically at relationality as this framework for policy. Relationality includes both the individual person and the relations and contexts that he or she is in. Relationality is developed in many of our philosophical traditions and also in several theological traditions. Whether you think theologies are the word of the divine or an illuminating metaphor, in both cases they offer us much about how the world and people work, and so about the policies that will lead to the greatest human flourishing. Please join us in this series of conversations. Commonwealth and Covenant was published by Erdman's Press in 2016. You can follow me at marciapally.com or search for me on Facebook and Twitter.
I want to start out with this basic idea about the structure of existence that we said earlier. The source of existence is a unity of all possible differentiations and existence itself, in a unity that we are not. We are radically different because we exist, but we also have a subset of differentiated characteristics. This makes us radically different from the reason there's everything, or anything. And yet, we must be in some kind of intimate relation, having something of that source of existence in order to exist. This leaves us with the idea that existence itself, the condition for existence, is differentiation in intimate relation without losing either. It also means that each particular person is an expression of whatever causes everything, the structuring cause, or the cause of causes, or God. Since the cause of causes is existence and all possible differentiated characteristics, each subset of differentiated characteristics is one possible expression of all that can be. All of us are one possible expression of the possibilities of being. We are possibilities of being. The philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty writes, "There is a sort of omnipotence of God without us, and Christ attests that God would not be fully God without becoming fully man. Transcendence no longer hangs over man. He becomes, strangely, its privileged bearer." We, each of us, are the privileged bearers of something of the transcendent source of all. We are one possibility of all existence in each of our differentiated selves. Each person is of this donative outgoing, donative from donation to give, the giving outgoing of the source of everything. Each person is of this giving outgoing, yet her distinct self, something like, here's an analogy, a child is of her parents, an expression of her parents, and could not come into being without her parents, and yet is distinct from her parents. And that's an analogy you might want to use to think about the structure of existence at all. All people come into existence only because of the union of their parents. That's how you get to be in the material world. And you are one possible expression of all the possible unions of your parents in terms of DNA and genes. And you know you're one possible expression because your siblings are other possible expressions. Yeah? So you are an expression of your parents, but you are not the same as your parents and you're not the same as your siblings. So analogically, you can use that perhaps as a useful analogy to existence itself. Each of us is an expression of the possibilities of existence, and each of us is different. We're different from the source of sources, the cause of causes, and we're also different from each other.
I have one comment.
Yes?
There is this sociologist or anthropologist, his name is Tomasello, and he made research about little children and the first social or relational expression, and he found out that little babies or little children start to point on things, and this is the first expression of social relation or relation.
There are other things that babies can do even before they can point. They smile, they cry. Those are all relational. Those are meant to be communicative. And if you've ever heard a baby cry, they are loudly communicative.
It's the first thing they do when they're born.
As they let you know they're here. I'm here to communicate. Remember Narvaez said that babies are born expecting playmates, right? Meaning caregivers and interactors. Okay, I want to move on. So we are all expressions of the cause of causes and distinct sets of expressions. Aquinas wrote, "In all things God himself is properly the cause of universal being, which is innermost in all things. In all things God works intimately." So God in us, so in is anthropomorphizing. God in us, right? It self-expresses being, and whatever particular subset of characteristics make you, without which you wouldn't be at all. But you are at the same time very different from God and very different from every other person who is, in her and his own right, a possible expression of all things that can be. We are differentiated beings partaking of the one source of being in non-identical repetition. We express something of the source of all being, but not identically. Now, we don't become miniature replicas, right? There's the Eiffel Tower, and then you can buy a little plastic keychain Eiffel Tower. That's not what's happening here. We don't have the same features as God, only smaller. We partake of the cause of causes analogously, non-identically. We express, we repeat something of the cause of causes, but analogously, the same way an analogy expresses its referent. A moment ago, I gave an analogy about how all babies come from their parents. They are of their parents. They're one possible expression of their parents. And they're different from their siblings, who are different expressions of their parents. Now, when I gave that analogy to existence per se, I did not mean parents are God, right? I didn't mean a one-to-one. That's how relation. I didn't mean parents are God, only smaller. That's not how analogies work. Analogies work is that the surface characteristics are different, but there's an underlying similarity or of kindness. And That is how we express the cause of causes. Not identically, this is not the mirror image, but analogously. In non-identical repetition, we partake of analogously, and this preserved Augustine's, the Church Father Augustine's understanding of God and us as maior dissimilitudo, God's radical or our radical dissimilarity from God, within tanta similitude, full similarity. Radical dissimilarity within full similarity. Of course, we have that full similarity because we have something of being in us. And we analogically express each of ours particular subset of differentiated characteristics. This is what Aquinas discussed in his work on the analogia entis, or analogy of being. Humanity, caused by the source of being God, is of an underlying analogous resemblance to him. Resemblance is anthropomorphizing. God is immanent and intimate within us, but ever beyond. He is in intimate relation, but ever distinct. In sum, as both beings and processes are of the donatus ars God, and as each of us expresses one possibility of all there can be, there is a great deal to unfold in the world. We have the source of sources, cause of causes, the one unity of being and all possible characteristics of anything may ever be now or in the future. And there is a great deal to unfold from this cause of causes, because it is being and all possible characteristics. And what we've had so far, we know of history, so we know a few things about the people who've been, maybe the plants that have been, some of which no longer exist. Dinosaurs have been, and they no longer exist. We know some, and some things have been that we don't know. They came and gone, and we don't know about them. Yeah? And then there are all the things that might come into being in the future. So there is a great deal to unfold from the self-expression of the cause of causes. John Betts calls this a positive infinity. God, the cause of causes, sets up the basic principles. For example, the presence of oxygen and nitrogen. While persons plant seeds and make things grow secondarily. This is Aquinas' classic example of how the cause of causes self-expresses in the world. Not, again, directly, not action for action, but by being the cause of causes. And we act in the world secondarily. God may make heat, moisture, the particular chemicals like oxygen and nitrogen that we have, the properties of seed germination, the fact that there is soil, that soil has certain chemical composition and not others. And we plant seeds secondarily and make things grow. We act secondarily in the world analogously to the cause of causes. This is the Thomist idea of secondary causes, and it was developed also by the medieval Islamic philosophers al-Ash'ari and al-Ghazali, who saw humanity as performing what God creates. Performing what God creates. God creates, he's the cause, it is the cause of causes. And we perform analogously, secondarily, what God, from the beginning, creates. Yeah? Are we okay on that? I like that, performing what God creates. This is similar to the ideas in the Judaic tradition of co-creatorship, and in both the Christian, and all the Abrahamic religions, of the Imago Dei, or Tselem Elohim in Hebrew, that we are in God's image. The Tselem, or the Imago, being in God's image, holds that humanity is made, partakes of God's image in an logic of a kindness. Right? Co-creatorship holds that humanity, analogously partaking of God's image, of God's being, and of some subset of possible characteristics, we have the capacity, because we partake of this, to work in the world within our human capacities, secondarily, as God's co-creators to further his vision in nature and in history. Indeed, the point of the Tselem Elohim and Imago Dei is that we have the capacity to act as God's co-creators and further the world. The capacity is our moral correspondence, in the Hebrew Dmut Elohim and in Latin Similitudo, to act in correspondence with the world's setup as it is set up of the cause of all causes. Human beings, the theologian Terence Fredheim writes, human beings are not only created in the image of God, this is who we are, they are also created to be the image of God. This is their role in the world. I want to read that again because it's a beautiful summation of the idea of co-creatorship and moral correspondence. Human beings are not only created in the image of God, this is who they are. They are also created to be the image of God. This is their role in the world. Because we are distinction amid relation, because that's the setup, that's the nature of existence. We are distinct and yet in profound intimate relation. That's a condition of existing. Because of that, of course, we are distinct from each other and profoundly in relation to each other. Partaking of divine distinction amid relation is thus the ground for distinction amid relation among persons. We don't have a choice about that. That's the setup of existence. Colin Gunton, the British philosopher, writes, everything may be what it is and not another thing, but it is also what it uniquely is by virtue of its relation to everything else. Martin Buber, the Jewish theologian and philosopher, writes, similarly, the individual is a fact of existence insofar as he steps into a living relation with other individuals. You don't have a choice if you intend to exist. Yes?
I have a question. This whole modern idea of individualization is one thing, but on the other hand, we have, since hundreds of thousands of years, we have people who prefer to be alone for, let's say, 6 or 7 months. They walk around, they explore a country or something like this. And how does this fit in this Martin Buber quote? Because these people that say they want to walk for 6 months through China or something, just alone.
This impulse to be alone, I think, is part of our separability. Sometimes you just want to close the door and go into your room and you don't want to relate anymore, right? And Virginia Woolf wrote that wonderful book, A Room of One's Own. We have and need private spaces. We need to be alone, walking in the field, walking through China in our room. This is part of our separability, our distinctness, and our differentiatedness from others. But even a backpacker developed as a child in relations, and not only relations within family community, but as we discussed, the nutrition, the education, the economic opportunities available to the child, to the child's parents, to the child's siblings, to the communities, are all formed by this networks and nexes of relations. Some of those people are close to you, some of those people who determine you are in relationship to them, but at quite a distance. Yeah? And human beings develop that way. We can have shorter or longer periods of time of wanting to be alone.
It's like separating from other humans, but still being situated. And then there sometimes, you know, this effect that this being situated develops, like compensating the being separated from humans is compensated by being more situated in the different surrounding you're in.
Maybe being situated in nature, or better, more attuned to animal life and plant life for a while, would also be situatedness.
And it's maybe also important to recognize, okay, there are people somewhere in this country.
Some of this brings me as well to the Goldman Sachs example, what we had, where the study was finding that the managers were in fact human beings. So that these managers were human beings. In fact, I wouldn't expect every manager to be at all in this whole person characteristics, being the job he or she fulfills, this person fulfills. So there's like, again, but we had this, when you're doing a job, you're assigned to some task and you're trying to fulfill this, so it's more about the surroundings. So
it's about expectations.
Yeah, the expectations, and you don't have to be in this situation in a whole person. Yeah.
The commander of Auschwitz was a loving father.
Yeah. And
I'm sorry.
No,
it's obviously a conscience. Is how much can I do with the? I mean, how much there's no excuse even for the manager or for anybody in my humanness. How much am I willing to compromise for my comfort? In the end, your conscience can tell you, "Oh, I'm just going to continue to screw some clients, or I'm just going to get off and do something else with my life."
And it's maybe
Sorry, I'm just.
the thing about the layers, so we all play roles in different situations. Here I'm the student, when I go home I'm the friend or the family member, or I'm, I don't know, a manager and then a politician and so on. And this is, so we have like our spheres and there we play, or we do not play, we just fulfill the expectations.
I don't think it's entirely
Not playing
passive.
like an actor.
You are participating in all of these different milieu, but I think, as we said earlier, that we also have a responsibility to look at the underlying values, priorities, assumptions of all of the systems we play in. Yeah? And it's one thing to be very loving at home and essentially a thief at work, not stealing from the cash box, but cheating your clients or selling merchandise that you know is defective, and so on. We are considering here examining the underlying worldviews of all of these systems that we're in. And what are the basic premises and worldviews that are undergirding them. And you're quite right in terms of subsystems and subcultures. The values, of course, differ. And your behavior will also differ. But you're still responsible, and we in this discussion are looking at what principles we can use to assess the undergirding premises of all the different contexts that we find ourselves in. And it's not just the Wall Street cowboys whose investment policies cause the Wall Street crash. We also ignore how many tragedies go on every day, how many refugees, how many homeless people, how many children dying of hunger, and what do? We donate some money, but we also don't spend all our days addressing these problems. And what we're talking about here is looking a little bit more basically. What are the cultural assumptions that make us organize our basic economic and political systems so that all of these issues, poverty, homelessness, refugees, poor education, poor nutrition, etc., poor health care, keep continuing? What is we are basically set up so that a certain span of problems continues. What are the assumptions? What is the worldview that we're using to organize these fundamental systems so that these issues keep continuing? That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, and I would say the action or the behavior of the Wall Street cowboys is nothing worse without the greed and expectations of the ordinary people to financial markets. So I go to my bank and I say, okay, I give you 5,000 euro, and I want 1 year later I want 6,000 or 7,000 back. So this is a greed.
Yes. Oh yeah?
Without these expectations, Wall Street cowboys can do what they want.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so.
That's why it's systemic. The Wall Street cowboys are working in a system of expectations, and we're looking. Remember separability amid situatedness. We are separable, we are all separable in our own consciences. If there are people who leave Wall Street, they say, I'm fed up. Or they work for a high-powered law firm, and they say, all I'm doing is facilitating one corrupt deal after another with no regard, even if it's illegal. I didn't say one illegal deal. Right? One ethically corrupt deal after another, I'm leaving. All right, I make $1.5 million a year. I'm leaving. I don't want to live this way anymore. Individuals are separable and have separable conscience, but we are all in interlocking nexes of relations for good and for ill, and we're looking at what are our assumptions so that the systems go the way they go, and they yield the advantages that they yield and also the disadvantages. So,
there's also like legal, what do you say in English, Rechtspositivismus, legal positivism. So you support your behavior as a financial market, so it's legal, I can do what I want.
Right.
This is the other example.
Right.
The other side of this.
Right, and that comes with certain assumptions. Legal positivism has certain assumptions underneath it about what law is, about how people should behave, about what the function of law, what the function of business, what the function of economics is, what your responsibility to other is or is not. There's many, many layers of assumptions underneath that.